Good morning, all. My name is Chandra. So, in this session, we will discuss about what is a batch process and how we are going to implement the batch process in Mulesoft. So, in generally, we know that batch means a group of things. So, within Mulesoft, it can be like events, or it can be a group of messages, or payloads, or a group of data. So to process this as a batch, whenever an event occurs within the MuleSoft, like when we are pulling the data from the database, or if there is a file system. So whenever the list of files and the records are pulled, so at that particular point of time, we can implement this batch process to process each message or payload. In batch process, we will need to process a group of events by following several steps to achieve the final outcome. And also, we need to know the result of the batch outcome. So what will happen whenever we are going to process these records within the batch process? We are going to consider each message as a record. And while processing the particular record, we might need to follow some rules or validations or verifications, and we need to update that record to other target system. And in this process, we are going to divide this into steps, and we are calling it as a batch steps. And whenever we are going to update the records from one system to other system, so we need to verify that data or record in system B, and then we need to update that information. So, for example, we are getting our retrieve data from system A, and we need to push the data to system B. In this process, we need to validate the records before processing to system B. And second point, we need to mark or identify the success records and update only those records. Update or insert those records in system B. So this is general requirement. And also we need the final outcome or result of the process. For example, in system A, we have technologies information in system A. So this information we wanted to process it to system B. So it is like a data sync between the systems. Or sometimes what will happen, we might need, so this is sync data. And sometimes we need to extract the data and also transform and load into other systems. So we call the ETL process. Extract, load. Here we call it as extract, transform, and load. So we can perform both these operations by using Mulesoft batch process. We have three phases. One is load and dispatch. So in load and dispatch phase, whatever the data that we are going to send to the batch process. So it will be internally loaded and divided into the records by using load and dispatch phase, and it will happen internally or implicitly. Implicit process. Okay. And second one is records, process records. So within process records, we will define multiple batch steps. For example, verify data and update or insert data and send an email. So these kind of steps we can define within the process records phase. And third phase is on complete phase. So in on complete phase, it will provide the outcome. In this phase, we will come to know the result of batch, job, or process, like number of records process, number of records failed, number of records succeeded. So these kind of information we can come to know within the on-complete phase. And if we wanted to perform any activity within the on-complete phase, so we can define that activity and we can call by using the flow reference components as well, and by defining the flows, subflows process. And if we do not define any transformation or any activity within the incomplete phase, the result of the batch process will just completes it. I mean, without acknowledging anything. So it will just print the information of the particular process or a particular instance, and then it will complete the on complete phase. So in Endpoint Studio, we are going to create a new project. So create new project, batch process. And within this batch process project, we are going to create a new flow. Yeah, instead of directly creating a flow, what we can do, we can search for batch. So within batch, these are the different components like batch steps, batch job, and batch aggregator. And yeah, let me discuss about one more thing. We have the batch steps, and we can even use the batch aggregator to upsert bulk records, or we can say batch record. So batch aggregator will be used to upsert bulk records. I mean, upsert means it is update or insert process, or you can even perform the delete or whatever the operation. So it will be useful to perform the operations in bulk. That means whenever we are inserting or updating the records, so if we wanted to perform this activity record by record, it will take time. And instead of that, we can define the batch aggregator size, and whenever the batch aggregator size is reached, then we can perform that particular operation. So in that way, we can use the batch aggregator. So we have batch steps as well as batch aggregator. So first we are going to create this batch job. So whenever we create the batch job, it is going to be defined within the flow. And to make sure that this batch job will be initiated or executed whenever a data is sent to this particular process, so we can define a scheduler. So search for scheduler. In scheduler, we are going to set the frequency 30 minutes, or you can even set the cron job when the job has to be executed or not. And this batch job can also be executed from other flows by using flow reference component. Uh, whatever the payload that was before this particular flow reference, so those payloads or data will be sent to this particular batch job process, and it will be divided or splitted into records from this batch job. We have a scheduler, and what we are going to do, we are going to use a select operation. In the select operation, we are going to get the information from the technologies MySQL database, MySQL connection, add recommend libraries, and here I am providing the details: host 3306 port, username, password, MySQL, run a test connection. Test connection is successful. Click on OK and save the file. And now we are going to provide a SQL query. Select star from technologies. Okay, we are not providing any where condition. So, but in general scenario, what will happen? We need to define certain conditions that will not pick up the process records again. Like for example, there will be a column within this particular technologies table, like the status column, whether the particular record is processed or errored out. So that kind of information we can maintain in the system A. For example, in our case, this MySQL database will be a system A. And we can define that it is not going to pick up the same records again and again. And by default, whenever we create this batch job, it is going to create the batch step within the batch job. Okay. And right now we can see the different properties configured for the batch job. So whenever a batch job is configured and whenever that particular batch job is processed, so it will create a batch job instance, and it will create an ID for the entire batch job. So for the process records phase and incomplete phase, it will have that particular ID, and we can come to know the status of the particular batch job. And here we can see the different options, like this is the batch job name, and max fail records 0 means if whenever we are processing this particular batch job, if we can allow the number of maximum failed records, so we can configure that. Even though if it is going to fail for 4 records or 5 records, it is acceptable. That means we can mention that max fail records in this batch job property. And the other option is the scheduling strategy. So by default, the steps within the batch job will be processed in sequential manner by default. And if we want to change this scheduling strategy, we can use other one like round robin. But in generally, we will use the sequential manner. And if there is any necessity that we wanted to use the round robin, and we can use it. And we know that how the round robin will work. For each message, it is going to execute a different uh, steps. And batch job instance ID. If we want to create a batch job instance ID on our board, then we can define it. Property batch block size. So by default, this batch block size is 100. That means it will load the number of records like 100 records in the queues. So whenever it is going to split the records in the load and dispatch phase, which is happening implicitly, so it is going to store those records in the queues within the Mulesoft. That will also happen by default. And we can mention this batch block size, how many batches it has to consider, and for each batch, what is the number of records that it can process. So I'm going to mention it as 2 so that we can know how we are going to process the records. In real time, it will be uh, multiples of hundreds, and there will be more number of records to process from system A to system. That means in real time. So it can be a Salesforce data we wanted to process into Oracle database, or MySQL data, employees data we wanted to send it to the payroll team. So there will be a separate payroll database or payroll system. So we wanted to sync the data between multiple applications or multiple systems. So we are going to use the batch process. And max concurrency. I mean, whenever if we want to provide this parallelism, like parallel, when we say parallelism means, so whenever we are processing the records by using the batch tab, so it is going to process the records in parallel, like parallel threads, and then uh, the records will be processed. Okay, I mean, even though the batch steps will be sequential, but the records within the batch job or steps, instead of waiting for the previous record, so it is going to process multiple records in parallel. Okay, and the information that we are going to set will be using max concurrency. And there is a target property. So target property, we can use it to provide the batch job result into a variable. So here we are going to define verify batch step. So we are giving a name, and since it is our first batch step, I'm not providing any accept expression. But if we wanted to provide the accept expression also, we can do that. For example, from the records like uh, payload dot status equal to uh, new. So we wanted to process only those new records, and then we can provide the expression here. And accept policy is something like that. If there are no failures, okay, then only process this particular step. Or if we wanted to process only failures in this particular step, you can mention accept policy as only failures. And if you want to process, even though it is a failed record or if it is a successful record, we can mention the accept policy as all. Okay, I'm going to give no failures by default, and accept expression, I'm leaving it to blank. And within this verify batch step, I'm going to provide a variable name, variable one, payload dot technology. I'm just defining some value, like what is the step. So this is a step one, verify. So here, whatever the data that will be coming from the database payload.technology will be appended to step 1 verify. And this is a variable one. We are defining these variables to know how the variable propagation will happen within the batch job across batch steps. Okay, I'm going to create one more variable outside the batch job. So within this, what I'm going to do, I'm going to define the size, technologies size. For this, what we can do, we can mention payload dot size. And after the verify batch step, I wanted to create one more batch step. Search for batch step and drag and drop it. So whenever we drag and drop, we can see this batch step added next to the verify batch step. So here we are going to upsert record, upsert batch step and accept expression. What I'm going to do, I want accept only the valid records. So I'm going to do payload dot is valid. The is valid equal to y. Then only I want to accept those records and process in upset batch step. And also accept policy, I am defining it as no failures. That means if any failure happens within the verify batch step, I don't want to consider that particular record to be processed within the upset batch step. Okay. And I am going to define a variable one payload.technology. Here, step 2, upset. And I am going to create one more variable 2. For example, within the technologies table, we have information like technology and company. So here I want to accept the company name, payload company. Then this variable I am going to define in variable 2. And now within the verify batch step, what I'm going to do, I am going to consider and transform the records technology. So payload dot technology company payload dot company. We will check what was the source information, whether it was company or provider. Based on that, we can again update the record. And the other one, created date, creation date. Or let me check my SQL workbench. I am going to connect to the local database and we will see what is the information available. So select from HPG technologies. So I'm connected to MySQL workbench to query the table so that we will map the details correctly. Here we have the technology provider created by creation date and updation date. So I am going to use the technology provider and created by payload dot created by. And even if there is a different field names on the target system, so we can do that particular transformation also, mapping and transformation within these particular batch steps, and we can perform the operation, and we can perform the insert or update operation on the target system. Technology created by, and here I wanted to create one variable like valid technologies, and so within the data view we can create the variables by using var keyword in the declarative section, and we will declare the variable name valid text equal to the technologies. For example, within this list of technologies, for example, we want to consider Angular and Mulesoft as a valid technologies. Mulesoft, and next is Angular and one more like JavaScript. So these values are a valid values. So in that case, what I'm going to do is valid. I'm going to create one more field, and within that field mapping, I'm going to provide a condition valid text. So I'm going to check this list of values against the record payload dot technology. If it is true, then only if contains, then value will be void, else n. So we have created the mapping. Now let us create one transform message in upset batch step. So we have the valid verify batch step information. We are going to make use of it, and within this is valid is not needed for us. And here on the target system, there is no column technology, but instead of technology, they have mentioned as a tool. So what is the tool? That is we are going to use, and instead of company, parent organization, parent org, and the column on target system instead of created by is user. So this is the information we wanted to transform and update in the system B. Okay, we have added a new transformation within the upset batch step. And I'm going to create one transform message within the onComplete phase, so that whatever the information that is processed, for example, if we see here, it is going to generate the batch job instance ID and the failed records and what is the failure on the onComplete phase, or if there is any issue with the input phase exception. So those kind of information we will map into the data view, and we can use this information to generate some mail or to generate a report outcome, and it will be done within the on-complete phase. So right now I'm going to leave as is, okay? And even we can see this variable information and we can access the variables within the on-complete phase. Loggers. So I'm going to add a logger. Payload and size. We have already defined a size, technical size. And let me check, it is payload.size. And also we need to add a transform message after the database operation, because it is going to produce a Java object records. So that we are going to transform into JSON records. Okay, and I am going to add one more logger when it enters into the batch job. Verify batch step start. This will be a end. One more logger. Upsert batch step start. Upsert batch step end. And within the batch aggregator, we have not configured anything, and we will see that later. I'm going to save this. Debug. Add the breakpoints, and we will observe the result. MySQL.technologies does not exist. Okay, I'm going to stop this application and let me check the SQL query. I'm going to add a schema name hpt.technologies and rerun the application. Yeah, now let us verify. Text size is null. Size equal to 1. We have payload records, but payload evaluate 5 size of. Okay, clear it, close it, and instead of using payload.size, we need to use size of payload. So it will provide the number of records within the particular event or particular payload. Let us check the records. Yeah, we have text size variable 8 and we have a payload. So this is a payload. Let us copy. Okay. And we are going to move step by step using a new debugger. We have configured multiple batch steps. So whenever batch step is configured, and we can see the batch job instance ID generated once it enters into the batch process, and we can use this batch job instance ID throughout the process. And observe this, whenever we are performing this step-by-step operation, it is not moving the thread sequentially to the next message process. It is uh, processing the first logger message process itself multiple times. That means it is processing in parallel threads. Okay. Here, whatever the operation that we have performed, right? So it will be applicable for each and every record. Okay, if you see for the next event, it is going to be considered for the next payload. That means here we have the .NET as a technology, and on that particular record, this operation is performed, and we can verify the is valid transformed payload as a N, means which is a not valid technology to process it. Okay, and we can move further. Since we have defined the batch block size as 2, whatever the information that we have received into this particular batch job, we have received 8 records, and that 8 records have been divided into 2 batch jobs. Sorry, 2 batch blocks and of 4 records in each block. And here we can observe that what is the information that is processing within the upset batch step. And every record that came to the upset batch step is a valid record. Okay, this way we can use the accept expression, and we can process the records in the subsequent batch steps. And once the records are processed from the batch steps, then the event or payload will be moved to the onComplete phase, and in onComplete phase we can verify this batch job instance ID, and for that particular batch job instance ID, what is the payload that has been uh, generated for the result. So here I'm going to move further, and yeah, let us check the console. Let us observe this. This is our SQL payload, which is of 8 records. And after that, for every record, we are performing a verify batch step. And within this verify batch step, this is a before batch step start. And we have transformed that record into a valid record or not. And then we are printing that after the batch step, which is the end of the particular step information. And we have one more batch step like upset batch step. Within this upset batch step, we are accepting only the valid is valid equal to y records and processing in the upset batch step. And that is the reason if we see here, Mulesoft, JavaScript, Angular, these technologies information is only processed in the upset batch step. And in final, we can see the number of records processed and failed, and also successful records information. Total records are 8, successful records 8, failed records 0. Even though we have used the accept expression, but it is not a failed record. And that is the reason it is not considered into the failed records, and we can see it as a successful records. Okay, and now let us do one thing. We are going to use a logger in onComplete phase. Okay, and within the batch aggregator in the upsert batch step, I am going to use one more logger in the aggregator section. Let me check aggregator. Within the aggregator, I am going to use a logger. So in generally, within the batch aggregator, what will happen? We can use this batch aggregator to perform bulk operations at a time. So within this, I am going to write a message. Aggregator process record. I'm going to use a payload. And we'll see what is the information that is going to process within the batch aggregator. And in batch aggregator, we need to configure one more property like aggregator size. I'm going to use the aggregator size as 4 record. So whenever the record size within the batch step process is reached to 4, then only this operation will be performed. Otherwise, if, for example, if there are 8 records, and for each 4 records, this batch aggregator will be executed once. Otherwise, if there are only 3 records within the particular batch step or process, so then it will perform this operation to 3 records because the max records is 3. Okay. And I'm going to do one more thing. Here within the batch step, I will raise an error using a choice condition. I'm going to use a choice condition. Here we have the records information, like the technologies information. So whenever the provider, whenever on particular field, if we want to raise an error, if there is a data validation failure, so we can raise an error using the raise error within the batch step. And also if any data failure or validation failure happens, that is limited to particular record only. So it will not impact the process of other records within the batch process. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a MySQL technology, and whenever this MySQL is occurred, I'm going to raise an exception. So for that, payload dot technology equal to MySQL. Error, and I'm going to use a raise error. Type, we are going to define custom error. This MySQL is this technology is not in scope. I'm going to raise this particular error. And if you want to configure this failure expression for multiple technologies, you can even configure that. So now we know that we are going to load 8 records, and within the 8 records, if MySQL record is available, then we are going to raise an exception. That means it is going to be a failure record. And here, what I'm going to do, I am going to mention MySQL also. because we wanted to process it as valid record, but within the upsert batch step, we want to accept only non-failures. So what will happen within the verify batch step, even though it is a valid record but not in scope, we are going to raise X. So I'm moving step by step and added a debug pointer at the transform message cell instead of moving step by step. So I have added a breakpoint at transform message in verify batch step and moving further. So whenever there is a MySQL technology within the payload, let us check the payload. Yeah, here technology is MySQL, but it is valid one. But after that, we have a condition. If this technology is MySQL, we wanted to throw an exception. So what will happen? Even though there is an exception for that particular record, the batch process is not aborted or it is not stopped. Henceforth, it is going to process the next records, and the process is happening in parallel for each records within the batch step. So we are going to restart the application and observe the result. And I am adding a breakpoint in the upsert batch step first logger and also at the raise error component in verify batch step. Yeah, we have received 8 records information because we have not applied any conditional query. So in general, what will happen? We need to provide a conditional query where we are not processing the same records again and again. And for that, within the batch steps, we need to update the source record information as well. Like we are doing an upsert batch step, right? So here we can configure, we need to create this record into the system B. And also within this, we have to mention like we need to update a source system record also for that particular table. So we need to update the information within system A also based on the primary key or the conditional based logic. Okay, so that it will not pick up the records. And now let us move further. Yeah, if we see this payload, we have record is valid is a yes because it is a one of the valid technologies MySQL. If we see here within this table, my Mulesoft, Angular, JavaScript, and MySQL are valid one. Okay, but this MySQL we are going to throw an error. It is not in scope as of now, so it will be excluded in the upsert batch step. I'm going to move further. Yeah, even though that particular batch step for the record is failed, it is not thrown exception out of the batch step or batch process. It is just limited to that particular record within the batch step. Okay. And within the upsert batch step, we will observe the information like we have Angular and it is the valid one and no error. Run the application. And here we are going to verify the console carefully how many records processed and what are the failed records and also how many times the batch aggregator has been executed. I'm going to copy this into the notepad. This is our SQL payload from system A, and we have 8 records. And let us observe within the verify batch step, we are going to receive 8 records since we have not provided any accept expression and there are no failed records before that particular step. And it is going to provide valid records by using the transformation that we have provided. MySQL, Angular, JavaScript, and Mulesoft are the valid technologies according to the business logic. And within this, MySQL is a not in scope technology, so that we are going to throw an exception. So that means there will be 3 successful records, and after that 3 successful records, we are going to accept the information and process it within the batch step 2. And yeah, this is the error we have thrown, custom error, and message is technology is not in scope. In our earlier scenario, we were getting the number of successful records as 0 since the max fail records on batch step we have configured as 0. Now, just for our understanding purpose, I have configured max fail records as 1 since MySQL is a failed record and we will observe the result. So here, yeah, MuleSoft, Angular, and JavaScript will be considered as a successful records and will be processed within the upsert batch step. And we need to observe one more logger like aggregator process record. So how many times this was executed. And even though we have configured the payload within the logger in the aggregator batch, it is not printed as a readable format because it is a Java bytes payload. So, I mean, it is a byte array format. And let us verify the number of occurrences for this. So aggregator process record has uh, 2 times within the logger because we have configured this batch size as 2. So there were totally 3 records, and within these 3 records, for each 2 records, it will process once. So as of now, there were 3 successful records and the aggregator process records first happened twice. And we will observe the on-complete phase record. Here, total records and loaded records are 8, and number of failed records is 1, and number of successful records is 7. Now, just for a change, we are going to remove this accept expression within the upset batch step and observe the record, observe the result. Whatever the variables that we are defining, right? So these variables will be accessible across the batch steps. Variable 1 is accessible within the upset batch step because it is defined before the upset batch step. Let me redeploy this application. Observe this result. Total records 8. One is error. And within the payload upset batch, or within this particular step, we are able to now process the records even though it is not a valid. I mean, it is just an identification whether to process the records or not. But since we have removed this within the accept expression, now we are able to process these records within the upset batch step. Okay. And let us observe the number of times this aggregator is executed. Find out this aggregator is executed 4 times. So we have loaded total 8 records and we have given the aggregated batch size as 2. So that means for each 2 successful records, this aggregator will be executed once. So in general scenario, this aggregator size will be configured even higher so that we can perform bulk operations to update or insert the records to that particular system B or the target system so that the process will be executed in speed manner. And since we have 7 successful records, the first 3 aggregator batches will execute each 2. That means 6 records, and the last batch aggregator will execute 1 record. Because we have only 1 left within the batch step or batch process. That's how we can execute the batch steps with aggregator. And here we can see this number of successful records, loaded records, all the information. And it is all dependent on the configurations, like how we want to process the batches in block size for the entire batch process and how many maximum failed records we can allow in order to stop the process or execute the process completely. Yeah, this is how we can configure the batch process within the Mulesoft. Thank you. Please like, share and subscribe.